Welcome back, and prepare yourself for a disturbing tale as we venture down the rabbit hole. The sun was beginning to lower, casting long and menacing shadows that stretched across the cracked pavements and derelict buildings. Jimmy lingered on the edge of desperation as he walked through his rundown neighborhood. Jimmy was an addict, a man whose life had unraveled into a series of bad decisions and darker impulses. His only happiness lay in the cold, comforting embrace of the drugs he bought from Pete, a nasty junkyard owner. Pete wasn't just a dealer. He was a man who thrived on the addiction and suffering of others. Jimmy felt the familiar itch crawling beneath his skin, a desperate need teasing his insides. He stumbled into the junkyard, clutching $50 in his sweaty palm. Pete stood there with a menacing look on his face. Behind him, piles of rusted metal and car wrecks. The junkyard was his kingdom, a sprawling graveyard of forgotten machines and shattered dreams. Jimmy approached, his voice shaky and desperate. "Pete, I need it. I've got a 50. That's all I have." Pete, a cruel smile playing on his lips, snatched the money without a word, examined it, then shook his head. "This ain't enough, Jimmy. You know the price." "Come on, Pete," Jimmy pleaded, his voice breaking. "I'm good for it. I just need a little to get by." Pete's response was swift and brutal. He slapped Jimmy across the face, sending him sprawling to the ground. The junkyard air smelled of rust and oil, mingling with the metallic taste of blood in Jimmy's mouth. From his position on the ground, Jimmy watched Pete stride away through the tangled maze of metal. The $50 now crumpled in Pete's fist. Jimmy's gaze drifted beyond Pete, catching sight of a large dog moving with a predatory grace. The beast was a monstrous creature, with muscles rippling beneath its diseased fur and a singular, chilling feature. A gaping scar where one eye should have been. As Pete walked past, he barked a command. "Down now." The dog obeyed, sitting with a rigid precision. But as Pete disappeared into the dim recesses of his office, the dog's head turned, its remaining eye locking onto Jimmy. A low growl rumbled from its throat, a promise of violence waiting to be unleashed. Jimmy staggered to his feet, his heart pounding. The encounter had left him shaken, but the gnawing need for a fix was stronger than his fear. He couldn't go on like this. Reckless and born of desperation, he'd return after dark, when the world was cloaked in shadows, and steal what he needed. It wasn't just about the drugs, it was about survival. As twilight descended, a plan forming in his mind, Jimmy made his way home past the local butcher shop around the corner. The butcher, named Chuck, was closing up for the day. He glanced up as Jimmy approached. "Hey there, Jimmy. You look rough. Everything okay?" Chuck asked, concern in his question. Jimmy forced a smile, though it came out more as a grimace. "Howdy, Chuck. I'm doing okay," he stuttered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Could you spare some offcuts for my dog?" Chuck nodded, reaching into the cooler to retrieve a small bag of meat scraps. He handed it over without question, though his eyes lingered on Jimmy, searching for something beneath the surface. Jimmy went home. With bolt cutters in one hand and meat scraps in the other, Jimmy returned to the junkyard. Night had fully claimed the city, and the moon hung high, casting an eerie glow over the sprawling labyrinth of rusted metal and broken machines. Jimmy's heart raced as he approached the locked gate and proceeded to use the bolt cutters. The padlock snapped with a satisfying clink, and the gate swung open with a creak that echoed into the night. Jimmy hesitated for a moment, the weight of his decision pressing down on him, but the thought of going the night without a fix was unbearable. Clutching the bag of meat, he slipped through the gate and into the maze of junk, every nerve on high alert. The rustle of debris underfoot a constant reminder of the danger lurking within. He moved cautiously, guided by the moonlight and the faint glow of Pete's office window in the distance. The path twisted and turned, each step bringing him closer to his goal, and the beast that stood between him and salvation. The dog appeared before him, emerging from the shadows like a specter from a nightmare. His growl was low and threatening, a primal sound that sent a shiver down Jimmy's spine. The scarred eye socket seemed to bore into him, a reminder of the creature's brutal nature. Jimmy's hand trembled as he reached into the bag, pulling out a hunk of raw meat. He tossed it towards the dog, his heart pounding in his chest. The beast sniffed the air, hesitated, then lunged at the offering, devouring it with savage hunger. Taking advantage of the distraction, Jimmy edged around the dog, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The office was just ahead, the glow of a dim light spilling through the cracked door. The beast finished the last morsel of meat and fixed its one-eyed gaze back on Jimmy. Sweat dripped down Jimmy's brow as he slipped into the office, the room reeking of stale smoke and whiskey. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with all manner of contraband, but it was the small locked safe beneath the desk that held Jimmy's attention. His hands shook as he rummaged through the drawers, searching for the key. It felt like an eternity before his fingers closed around the cold metal of the key. He fumbled with a lock, adrenaline surging as the safe door swung open. Inside lay the prize he sought, bags of powder and pills that promised release from the agony clawing at his insides. As he grabbed the drugs, his eyes fell upon a familiar object, a crumpled $50 note, the one Pete had taken from him earlier. Jimmy snatched it up, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction at reclaiming what was his. As he turned to leave, a low-pitched growl froze him in place. The dog stood in the doorway, its maw twisted into a snarl, the meat forgotten. Jimmy's heart thundered in his chest as he backed away, panic clawing at his throat. "Easy, boy," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm leaving, see? No trouble." The beast lunged. He stumbled back, crashing into the shelves as chaos erupted around him. The dog advanced, bared teeth, a force of nature that wouldn't be denied. Jimmy bolted from the office, adrenaline propelling him through the maze of junk. The gate was just ahead, the promise of freedom beckoning, but the growl behind him spurred him on, the beast relentless in its pursuit. He ducked between the towering heaps of metal, heart racing as he searched for an escape. His breath came in ragged gasps, each step fueled by desperation and fear. The dog was close behind, its growl echoing through the junkyard like a death knell. In his panic, Jimmy stumbled into the wreck of an old car, its door hanging ajar. He threw himself inside, slamming the door shut just as the dog lunged. The beast's jaws snapped inches from his face, its breath hot and rancid. Jimmy fumbled with the drugs, hands shaking as he prepared his fix. The needle slid into his vein, bringing with it a surge of adrenaline and clarity. His senses sharpened, the world snapping into focus as the drugs took hold. The dog clawed at the car, its growl a constant threat. Jimmy felt a new strength coursing through him, a wild, reckless energy that pushed him to act. He kicked open the car door with all his might, the metal slamming into the beast's face with a sickening thud. The dog yelped, stumbling back as Jimmy seized his chance. He burst from the car, legs pumping as he sprinted for the exit. The junkyard was a blur of shadows and motion, the path ahead lit only by the pale glow of the moon. The dog recovered quickly, its relentless pursuit driving it forward. It caught up to Jimmy at the gate, teeth sinking into his leg with a vicious snap. Pain shot through him, but the adrenaline dulled its edge, pushing him to fight back. Jimmy turned, eyes wild with desperation as the beast gnawed at his leg. He lashed out, fingers finding the dog's remaining eye, and jabbing with a savage determination. The dog howled, releasing its grip as it recoiled in pain. Gasping for breath, Jimmy hobbled away, leg burning with every step. The junkyard receded behind him, a dark and terrible memory that would haunt his nightmares. But he was free, alive, and for now, that was enough. As he stumbled down the street, blood saturating his jeans, heart still racing, Jimmy clutched the drugs to his chest. He had won. Behind him, the junkyard lay silent. Jimmy didn't look back. As we drift out of the rabbit hole, each story we share is a dangerous fix that pulls you deeper, leaving you craving more. Once you've tasted the darkness, it's hard to escape. Don't forget to subscribe and join us again as we dive deeper into the mysteries that skirt the edges of reality. Because next time, the horror might just find its way from the rabbit hole and into your home. Thanks for watching.